Hi, I'm Tasha De Cruz, nutritional therapist and mindful breastfeeding supporter. Before I had kids, I was an expert on parenting. I knew my kids would be well behaved, confident, and cooperative, and I'd respond calmly and patiently throughout the night and never worry about a lack of sleep. And I would definitely never shout. Fast forward today, and 2 children, mountains of toast and butter, endless ice cream, crackers, and biscuits, and that's just for me. And plenty of shouting later. You'll see the mother I am today. One that finally understands that being healthy is much, much more than cooking organic from scratch every day. One who has learned to occasionally tame the rage and breathe through the tantrums. The kind of mother I'm becoming proud of as I start to learn what's truly important about parenting. I created Raising Healthy Mothers to share what I've learned along the way and the experts who have helped me get here. I hold out a warm hand and offer space for you to have a cup of tea with me and learn alongside me what it truly means to be a healthy mother. So if you're an exhausted mother or one in the making and hoping to become a calmer, more patient, better nourished person without giving up the chocolate, then you're in the right place. Come and join me on my motherhood journey. Hi, I'm Tasha De Cruz, nutritional therapist and mindful breastfeeding supporter. Before I had kids, I was an expert on parenting. I knew my kids would be well behaved, confident, and cooperative, and I'd respond calmly and patiently throughout the night and never worry about a lack of sleep. And I would definitely never shout. Fast forward today, and 2 children, mountains of toast and butter, endless ice cream, crackers, and biscuits, and that's just for me. And plenty of shouting later. You'll see the mother I am today. One that finally understands that being healthy is much, much more than cooking organic from scratch every day. One who has learned to occasionally tame the rage and breathe through the tantrums. The kind of mother I'm becoming proud of as I start to learn what's truly important about parenting. I created Raising Healthy Mothers to share what I've learned along the way and the experts who have helped me get here. I hold out a warm hand and offer space for you to have a cup of tea with me and learn alongside me what it truly means to be a healthy mother. So if you're an exhausted mother or one in the making and hoping to become a calmer, more patient, better nourished person without giving up the chocolate, then you're in the right place. Come and join me on my motherhood journey. Hello and welcome back to Raising Healthy Mothers. It is cold where I am. I wonder if it is where you are too. Autumn has finally arrived. It is raining outside. It's been grey for 3 weeks, so we are well and truly into the season of things getting colder. Anyway, this week I'm doing something a little bit different than usual for this podcast. I'm doing a bit of an Ask Me Anything episode. I've done them a couple of times before. They've always been really popular. So I love doing these as well because these are genuine, real questions that people ask me when they work with me or if they do a reset with me. And actually all of these questions are genuine, real questions that came up inside the Winter Wellness Reset that is currently going on at the moment. So we have a WhatsApp group and the idea is that, the support is there whenever you need it. So the questions just come up and we answer them straight away. So these are the kind of questions that have come up in the reset, but honestly, they are very similar to the kind of questions I get asked all the time. So it's totally relevant, even though you're not actually in the reset potentially. So I wanted to bring those questions here because if one person in the reset is wondering these things, then there's a good chance you are too. And actually, you will notice a bit of a theme running through today's answers because as far as I'm concerned, everything about nutrition and food and cooking is all about being flexible, trusting your instincts and not letting perfection be the enemy of actually doing the damn thing, whatever it is. So grab a cup of tea, or if it's lunchtime, get some lunch or whatever, wherever you are, whatever time it is, get comfortable and let's get into your questions. The first question that came up actually a lot during the reset in the early days is actually one that I hear sometimes as well from clients and subscribers to the weekly table as well. And that is, do I need to follow the meal plan exactly, or is it better to just pick and choose what works for my family? Now, obviously, I do not know what your family context is. I don't know what your life is like, so definitely adapt it. The meal plan that I provide in the reset is there to make your life easier, not to just give you another list of rules to follow or, kind of restrictions to feel like you're doing it wrong if you're not following it. And I'll be really honest here, I've actually always been a little bit resistant to providing meal plans, partly because I know that what I like and what my family eats is probably completely different to yours. So your context is really different. And also because I don't want people to feel that restriction of, I have to follow it exactly, or if I'm not following it, I must be doing it wrong. There is no such thing as doing it wrong. It's just about how it fits into your life and your family. But people do ask me for them. They do want to know. And when I think back to when I first started changing the way I ate and how I showed up for myself when it came to nutrition, I genuinely just wanted someone to tell me what to eat. And this was years ago. This was like 15 years ago. I was paleo at the time, and I used to Google meal plans for paleo, and there weren't a lot that came up. It was pre-ChatGPT. It just felt there wasn't a lot of paleo as well going around, and and anything that did come up was American. It wasn't British, and it just didn't really fit. It didn't really suit the way we like to eat over here. So it just kind of didn't really work for me, and I still kind of I found it really hard. I just wanted someone to tell me what to eat, to make it simple, take the thinking out of it. And I wasn't even a mum at that point. Like, I was just a 20-something swanning off to work every day in London, really had no care in the world. But even then, when I did find a meal plan, or if I did get some kind of inspiration from somewhere, I never ever actually followed the meal plans to the letter. In fact, I probably never even actually followed it at all. But what I did find helpful was just seeing the structure and the flow written out by someone else who's done the thinking for me, to understand how one meal can roll into the next and how it can all fit together and make something feel a bit balanced. And honestly, that was my purpose with starting the weekly table meal plan membership, just to help you give a sense of flow and rhythm to your week, so that you get that inspiration, so you know how you can reuse food and repurpose it to suit what is happening in your life, but also know that if whatever happens, if you have to go back down, if you have to resort to dippy eggs or cheese on toast, that's totally fine. You never have to feel like you have to follow it exactly. Those kind of meal plans are really just a toolkit. You pick the meals that fit your week, your energy, your context, your budget, and what you've got going on for that week. Everyone's family is so different, and that's exactly how it should be. And genuinely, what matters isn't doing it perfectly. It's about building a rhythm that works for you, making sure that you get into a habit of knowing what you're going to cook, knowing what's coming up, so that you can get the right food in, and then you get to 5 o'clock, you're not staring at the fridge wondering what the heck to make for dinner tonight. In any case, whatever the habit is, or whatever the thing that you're trying to change, doing something 70% consistently is way better than going all in, black and white, all or nothing, 100% for 3 days, and then giving up entirely because it's way too much. It is just overwhelming to go in too hard too soon. So just take it easy, take what works for you, and just take it step by step. So the second question that came up quite a lot in the reset was actually on the specific ingredients or food that I put in the meal plans and the recipes. And one question that came up was, is it okay if I just buy falafels, or if I get pre-made things like soups or sauces, or do I have to make everything from scratch? Okay, you know me by now. I am not about shoulds and have tos, okay? Shop bought can be totally fine. But I do say, especially if you're doing the reset, is to make sure that you know what is in that package or whatever it is that you're buying. So read the ingredients, know what to look for. I always say try and look for a really short list of foods, make sure they're mostly whole foods in there, stuff that you would use in your kitchen. So if you're taking falafel, for instance, it should just have chickpeas and herbs and spices. There shouldn't really be additives or preservatives or anything there that you wouldn't use in your kitchen. But actually, when this question came up about falafel in particular, I did do a bit of a Google and had a look at all the falafels out there. And for the most part, they're mostly fine. They don't have really weird ingredients that I just thought were not any good. Like, they were mostly fine. And I think that is the case quite often, is that when you do get stuff that is pre-packaged or pre-made, check the ingredients and you get to know which are the ones that you can just go for without having to keep checking, and which are the ones that you're like, I need to keep checking, or actually it's not worth buying this at all. Now, having said that, is it better to always make your own from scratch? Well, I think it is, if you're looking at it purely from a quality and nutrition point of view, in the sense that if you make something from scratch, you know when it was made and you know how fresh the ingredients were. If you buy, for example, falafel on the shelf, you actually don't really know how long it's been there and what the ingredients were like when they were made and how long it's been standing around. Now, obviously, it's going to have that use by date, so it's obviously going to be safe to eat in terms of like not going to cause any issues, but how fresh is the ingredients themselves? Now, obviously, you can go really far with this and say, hey, you should be growing all your own stuff and only picking stuff from your own garden. Now, that just goes a bit crazy. We are not about that kind of intense perfection. It's definitely not about feeling guilty. If you enjoy cooking and you love kind of making things from scratch, go for it, do it. But also don't feel guilty about using shortcuts. The goal isn't perfection, it's about reducing the overwhelm and, generally speaking, for the most part, 70 to 80% of the time, eating nourishing whole foods that fits into your real life context. It's not about saying everything has to be cooked from scratch, otherwise you're doing it wrong. You are not doing it wrong. I promise you. Just the fact that you're here listening to this podcast, maybe you've been on my resets, maybe you've been a client, maybe you've just been listening to the podcast, you've made 1 or 2 changes to the way you eat. That means that you care and that you are already interested in nutrition and you are already doing really, really well, better than most people out there in the world. Then another question that came up in the reset was around finding maybe slightly more exotic ingredients. So in particular, the ingredients that came up as not being easy to find were enoki mushrooms and cacao nibs. And the question was, what's the best way to swap them without losing the benefits? So again, it is about not causing that overwhelm and definitely not spending more money than necessary. So I was a little bit worried about adding slightly unusual ingredients to this reset. I really don't want the reset or any of my weekly meal plans on the weekly table. It's not about kind of overwhelming, and I really don't want it to feel like it's a weird and wonderful list of wellness ingredients that cost an arm and a leg you're never going to use again, that are just not worth it. Like, that is not what I'm about. I'm about cooking everyday food using everyday ingredients. But having said that, because this reset in particular was focused on immune health and winter wellness, there were a few relatively easier to get ingredients that have become a little bit more everyday that I did include in the recipes, partly to stretch the participants as well. Sometimes, we get into a bit of a rut of cooking the same food and cooking the same variety, cooking the same vegetables. So it was like, can we stretch ourselves a little bit? If you have access to these foods, or if you shop online especially, you might be able to find these things in any case. But anyway, of course, substituting is always fine. Don't let an ingredient be the reason you don't make a recipe. If you notice that, you read through a recipe and you notice there's an ingredient there that you can't get, or you don't know what it is, don't let that be the reason not to use it. That's why Google is there. ChatGPT can help as well. If you've got a recipe that you're like, I don't know what that is, Google it, look it up, find out what it is, and then find the essence of it and swap it. It's probably going to be fine. And, if you do have a recipe, especially if it's one of mine and you're like, I have no idea what this is, I have no idea what I can use instead, feel free to get in touch with me and let me know, and I will help you out for sure. But in this reset, as I said, it was about immune health, so specific mushrooms were going to be particularly helpful for the immune health. But as I said, it's about moving forward. Just keep going. In this case, any Asian mushrooms would have been fine. Shiitake are really great for immune system as well. And of course, I think that recipe did actually have shiitakes in, and oyster mushrooms. So it's really not about just saying, oh, if I don't have this one ingredient, I can't make that recipe. Absolutely not. And to be honest, even if you just used normal chestnut mushrooms, white mushrooms, it would have been perfectly fine, because it's about eating a meal that you might not have done otherwise and putting it into your rotation. In fact, that particular recipe, that one with the enoki mushrooms, was a really, really popular one in the reset. Everyone who made it said that was really delicious, and they would definitely make that again. And that's my favorite thing actually about running the resets, is that often the recipes that people are introduced to become their normal rotation. In fact, one of the people who joined the reset was like, oh, I'm so glad to see some familiars in there that I already know, that are already part of my rotation. That's going to make meal planning really easy, because it's not about trying brand new recipes every single day of the week, because that is a way to sort of recipe for burnout. But if the recipes have already become part of your normal rotation, then you can just slot those in, and then you can add in a couple of new and interesting ones, knowing that the recipes are always so good that they will become part of your rotation. Now, the other ingredient that really came up as like what is that? How do I find that? Is cacao nibs. Cacao nibs are really rich in antioxidants and polyphenols that are really helpful for the immune system, and that's why it went into the reset meal plan. But of course, again, don't let perfection be the enemy of just getting things done. So you can just use dark chocolate instead, or cocoa powder. I mean, it depends obviously on what the recipe was, because the texture is particular. But to be honest, that's what cacao nibs are usually used for, rather than having a particular property that means it's necessary for its texture or whatever. So it's totally fine to just use grated dark chocolate or a sprinkle of cocoa powder instead of cacao nibs, generally speaking. And I know for this particular recipe, which I think was a chocolate pot for the morning, cacao nibs were just there on top as a sort of texture thing. The main point when you join the reset, or if you do one of my meal plans and the weekly table, the main point is to try something new and to diversify what you already eat. That's what really supports your immune system and your health and your gut and everything. So as I said, it's thinking about variety over perfection. Every single swap that you do, it's not going to detract from it. It will probably only add to it. It will only add its own benefits. And then similarly, a question that came up a little bit later was, are normal white mushrooms or chestnut mushrooms just as good as exotic ones for immune support? So I had to do a little bit of research into this because a lot of the information on mushrooms are on those exotic Asian mushrooms. And partly the reason for that is that a lot of that research has been done in China and Japan, where those mushrooms are regularly consumed. So a lot of the information that we have about the health benefits of mushrooms are about mushrooms that are used in those cuisines a lot more. So I did some research. So white or chestnut mushrooms do contain beta glucans, which are the immune modulating compounds that we talked quite a lot about in the reset, but they're at lower levels. And actually what I found quite interesting in a research paper I read was that the stalks of mushrooms, any mushrooms, but chestnut mushrooms and white mushrooms as well, have higher concentrations of these beta glucans in. And that's really interesting because quite often we throw them away. They're quite easy to kind of peel off from the cap, maybe peel the cap, skin away, and then chuck the stalks, especially if they've kind of been hanging around a little bit and gone a bit slimy. But anyway, but the stalks actually have higher concentrations of these beta glucans in. So if they're good to eat, don't throw them away. Chop them up, add them to your meal as well, and you will get those benefits. But having said that, the exotic mushrooms that I talked about in the reset, things like shiitake, oyster, maitake, and reishi, which is not an edible culinary mushroom, but is one that you would add as a supplement, they all have unique compounds that support immunity in different ways. And that's why in the reset there were a few recipes that had these different mushrooms in, so we rotated around them just to kind of add a bit of variety. So it is about rotating them. Variety is so key for gut and immune diversity. So it is important to try something new. But of course, if you can't get hold of it, if they're really difficult to find, if you just don't live in a place that has those kind of stuff in the supermarkets, it's fine. As I said, any mushroom is better than none. Chuck them into whatever meal you can, and it's totally fine to step away from the recipe if necessary. So moving on completely away from food, actually. So one of the things that we talked about in the reset was about sleep quality and making sure that we are kind of putting our phones away and not kind of falling asleep while scrolling on our phone and kind of staying up later than we might like to. And someone said to me, well, the problem is I quite like listening to a podcast to fall asleep. Is that okay? Or is that going to affect my sleep quality? And I think this is a really interesting question because one of the reasons why we don't want to use our phones or, watch TV or have any screens near us at bedtime is because sometimes what we're watching or listening to is too stimulating, and that can kind of cause our nervous system to kind of get wound up a little bit rather than relaxing, ready for sleep. But also it's about the blue light. The actual light that is emitted from there tricks our brain into thinking that it's still daytime rather than nighttime when it should be winding down. And if you think about it, if you think back to our sort of, not very many years ago, like 200 years ago, when we didn't have electricity, when there was no such thing as electric lights, we would have just had candles or fire to see by. And because they were very expensive as well to produce or to get hold of, we wouldn't have used that many either. So we really would have lived in a state of darkness when night came. We might have had a very warm glow, very low light from a candle or a fire, but generally speaking, it would have been pretty dark. And so the kind of life that we live at the moment is very, very artificial. We have these really bright lights and we can stay awake for long, long after it has gone dark. And that is probably not normal for our physiology. We probably should be going to sleep as soon as it gets dark. Okay, so that's that. That is why, generally speaking, my recommendation is to try and keep your lighting low as soon as it gets dark. Draw the curtains, put side lights on, light candles if you can, just keeping it really kind of low light and so on, and definitely keeping your screens away. So coming back to the actual question is it okay to listen to podcasts to fall asleep? I think it probably is, as long as it's not too stimulating. So, maybe don't listen to true crime podcasts or audiobooks that might kind of get you a little bit excited. But, I don't think it would be detrimental if it helps to calm a busy mind, if it helps to take your mind off your to-do list or take your mind off what happened in the day or what's coming up tomorrow. Maybe listening to an audiobook or listening to a podcast can just help calm you down a little bit. The key thing is to just tune in and pay attention and notice whether your phone is actually disrupting your habits. Like if you have your phone next to you because you've listened to your podcast at night, is it going to cause you to scroll? Like maybe your podcast is finished and you pick up your phone to turn it off and you might have a quick scroll, or maybe you've got a notification, you read that message and you go onto Instagram and kind of get through that whole cycle again. Or if you wake up in the middle of the night, does your phone being next to you trigger you to pick it up, to just kind of have a quick look at the time, notice there's a message there or a notification, and then go in and have a look? So I guess to me, the question is much less about what you're actually listening to or actually doing, and what it might trigger if you have your phone next to you at nighttime. So in our house, our bedroom is a relatively strict no phone zone. Having said that, I do actually have an old phone next to me at nighttime, because the first thing I do when I wake up is listen to a morning meditation. So I need to have something next to me. I cannot meditate on my own. I need to be guided through it. So I found a really old phone that is cracked. It is very old. It is very, very sluggish. And all it has on there is my meditation app. So it is the first thing I do when I wake up, but I literally can't do anything other than just go on the meditation app and listen to it. So if you do listen to podcasts, can you find an old phone or a device that doesn't have messages or notifications on to use instead? Because ideally you want to avoid phones an hour before bed and after waking up, because that is when your brain is most sensitive to light and when your cortisol can spike too high if you're using your phone. But obviously, do what works for you. If listening to a podcast helps you fall asleep at night, and it isn't affecting your sleep during the night, and it isn't causing you to kind of get on your phone and scroll first thing in the morning, go for it. Don't let me tell you what you should and shouldn't do and how to live your life. So coming back to food then, another question I had was around freezing food, and whether if you use frozen ginger, garlic, or if you freeze lemon, does it reduce their benefits? So freezing is generally fine. It actually often helps to lock in some of the nutrients, especially if the food has been kind of picked and then frozen straight away. Often it is actually fresher to use frozen food that has been frozen straight away rather than kind of travelled a long way before it's come to our house. Sometimes it can slightly reduce the vitamin content, but the beneficial compounds specifically around immune system probably remain intact if you do freeze it first. Again, back to what I was saying at the start, it is far better to use frozen and actually eat it than buying something, not using it going rotten and you having to throw it away anyway. Like it's, freezing is there as a really brilliant tool to help prolong the life of your food. And the reason why this came up actually was because one of the suggestions in the reset was to drink a ginger garlic steeper. And someone was saying, they have thought about using kind of freezing their own ginger, garlic and lemon slices just to kind of make a really quick immune drink. Again, if it means you actually do it, then it's way better to actually do it than to not do it, if that makes sense. I think it's quite convenient, and I think why not? I often use jars of garlic and ginger actually in my cooking. The pre-crushed or grated ginger and garlic is just so much easier. It really just is. And if I'm making a curry or a stew or whatever it is that needs ginger and garlic, I would just much rather just get it out of my fridge or freezer than kind of worry about the fact that I've got to go and it helps saves time. Like, why wouldn't you? Just, if you do have a bit of fresh ginger and you can, have a bit of time to grate it fresh, then do that as well. But also don't worry, think of the freezer as your best friend for keeping healthy habits actually happening, keeping it realistic. And then the final question I have, and I have this every single time I run a reset, is I'm feeling behind. I haven't done any prep this week. I haven't planned my meals. How do you stay on top of planning and cooking when life feels full on? And the thing is, this is motherhood in a nutshell, isn't it? Life just does feel really full on. And the thing I remind all my reset participants all the time is you're not behind. So when I run these resets, they tend to be 1 or 2 weeks long. This one is 2 weeks long. And I always just try and say, it doesn't really matter where you are when you join and at what point you actually join. Some people join because they want to get hold of the information and the recipes, but then they go away and they can't actually do it at the time when we do it, but they almost always come back and then they kind of follow it as they go along. We have a WhatsApp group for support, so even if you are not actually engaging in the actual recipes and the meal plan, you can always be a part of the conversation even if you're not really doing it. And then when you come back, if you've been away, you come back and you can kind of slot right in. I usually keep the chat open for a couple of weeks after to make sure that any final kind of issues are wrapped up, and just kind of often the conversation keeps going anyway. People love kind of continuing taking photos of their food and sharing it on there and getting everyone to discuss what is working really, really well for them. But whatever it is, whatever your goal, whatever you're part of, if you are doing something where you're changing the way you're eating or whatever, focus on one small win a day. Okay, don't think about the whole fact that, you're supposed to be following this 2-week meal plan and you haven't managed to do it at all. Just think about one thing at a time. Maybe you've prepped breakfast today and normally you skip it. So that's a massive win, actually. Maybe you make a big batch of soup so that you've got lunch for the whole week sorted. Or maybe you've chopped a whole load of veg in advance. Maybe you've prepared a dump bag and you've put it in the freezer ready to put in the slow cooker later in the week. These are all huge wins. These are all things that are going to make life so much easier for you. It's going to mean that you actually get some food, get some nutrition in a way that you might not have done otherwise. And we also like to talk about building in tiny routines to help keep things running smoothly. So whether that is kind of having a think about what can I do in 5 minutes while the kettle boils that's going to make dinner easier to get ready tonight, or maybe it's clear the kitchen before the kids go up to bed so that you just have the kitchen clear so that you have an actual evening to yourself rather than having to finish up with all the chores. But give yourself permission to simplify. Not every meal has to be a brand new, exciting from scratch recipe. This is why I am such a champion of leftovers and repurposing them and repeating the meals that you absolutely love making. Although I create a new meal plan every single week on the weekly table, I do repeat the recipes a lot. They might look a bit different, like I might have made pork tacos one week and then beef tacos another week, but the actual recipes are going to be very similar. And similarly, I will make the same suggestions on how to use your leftovers. And it's not because I'm lazy or because I don't have any ideas. It's not that. It's actually because I want you to start thinking for yourself. Oh, I've got leftover roast chicken today. I know what I could make. I could make fried rice. I could make a soup. I could make a fricassee. I could make fajitas. There are so many options out there. And my meal plan, my role with the weekly table, is just to give you inspiration, to let you know that this is what you could do. And it's totally up to you whether you do it or not. Remember, it's about progress, not perfection. Life happens. Motherhood is busy and crazy, and life is there for living. It's not for kind of being strict about. The goal is to stay connected to your goals, the habits that you want to change, and what makes you feel good. So there you have it. Those are the brilliant questions that I took away from last week's Winter Wellness Reset that we're still in the middle of at the moment. We've got one more week to go. And if you like the idea of having a bit of guidance every single week with food inspiration that is genuine, real life, family friendly, then you will absolutely love the weekly table. It is my weekly meal plan subscription, but think of it more like a guide rather than a strict rule book. You do not have to follow all of the recipes at all. But each week I share the full recipes, prep tips, any ideas for fussy eaters, ideas on how to repurpose leftovers, all designed with balance, nourishment, and busy family life in mind. You can follow it exactly, or you can just use it for inspiration when you're planning your week ahead. Either way, it takes the stress out of deciding what to cook for dinner every single night. You can join via Substack, or you can find the link in the show notes below. And if you enjoyed this Ask Me Anything edition of Raising Healthy Mothers, I would love to know your questions. Please send me a message on WhatsApp. I'm at Tasha De Cruz with your own questions, and I will include them in the next one I do. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Raising Healthy Mothers, and I will see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you enjoyed it and want more support to feed yourself well, even when life is full on, come and join the weekly table. This is my free weekly meal inspiration full of simple ideas, nutrition tips for mums, and a reminder that you deserve to feel good too. Head over to tashadecruz.substack.com for all the details.